Hello, everybody. Good afternoon again for day 3 of LRVS, and I'm super excited. My really good friend, Greg Livingstone, who's with us. We're going to be talking about the drive towards sustainability, right? Sustainable lubrication. So, Greg, I'm just going to kick off your presentation.
Perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
See you guys in a bit.
Hi, I'm Greg Livingstone with Fluitec. Thanks so much for joining, and today I'll be talking about the drive towards sustainable lubrication. And I will also touch on what greenwashing is to make sure you have enough awareness and knowledge to avoid this deceptive marketing tactic. I will talk to you today about the drive towards decarbonization in the industry, what greenwashing is, and what can be done to try to avoid that. Specifically, the drive towards sustainable lubrication, and then I'll wrap it up with a short summary. Now, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change has provided a roadmap to meet the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature increases to a maximum of 1.5 degrees C. Now, each industry segment has put together a roadmap on how that vertical can change and evolve and meet the greenhouse gas limits and greenhouse gas requirements. In particular is the International Energy Agency, which has provided a very clear roadmap to the largest sector that's contributing to emissions that it's impacting climate change, the global energy sector. What all of this means, the energy industry is going to be undergoing really significant disruptive changes in the coming decades, significantly more than we've seen, say, in the last 150 years. The oil industry, the energy industry, accounts for about 42% of global emissions. And one of the major changes is that investors, governments, consumers are really all demanding sustainability reporting. So now we have the vast majority of energy companies are actually have a sustainability section in their annual reports. This is something that is being measured and monitored, and we are seeing pretty significant announcements by some of the leading companies in the world that are committing to net zero. The bottom line is that all of these changes will not only have a big impact in the energy industry, it will have a big impact on the lubricant industry and in our space. So now we get to greenwashing. Greenwashing is when a company spends more resources marketing itself as environmentally friendly than actually on minimizing its environmental impact. And you can understand why. In the B2C world, if you have two products that are both the same price and both appear to be equivalent quality-wise, if one product is marketed as more sustainable, the vast majority of the population, over 90%, will actually purchase this product. And in fact, if this product, the more sustainable product, costs even moderately more, 65% will actually buy the more sustainable option. So here's the challenge we have. if two different companies are selling two different products, but one is marketed more as a sustainable product, regardless of whether or not it is, this provides a pretty significant competitive advantage over the other non-environmentally marketed products. So there's been a lot of effort to actually market materials and products as environmentally friendly to make a more appealing product for the consumer. Here's a challenge, and this is what greenwashing is. Greenwashing is trying to make your product look as green as possible, but there may not actually be a metric in place to actually measure this. So from a consumer perspective, how do we actually know what product is more sustainable than another? And coming back to the world of oil, how do you actually know if one oil solution is more sustainable than the other? Shortly, I will review what we can do in our industry to help measure the sustainability of the total environmental impact of a product, and therefore how we can try to avoid greenwashing in our space. But one of the things we have seen is a pretty significant drive towards sustainable lubricants. And this can be covered in three primary areas. First, actually using more sustainable lubricants. Secondly, employing more sustainable lubrication practices. And then finally, improving the end of life scenario, which can have a pretty significant reduction in lowering your carbon footprint. So let's talk about sustainable lubricants. This is where things start to become a little bit confusing because we have this term environmentally accepted lubricants. Is that different than a sustainable lubricant? Well, environmentally accepted lubricant is when you have a product that's 90% biodegradable. You have 5% of it can be non-biodegradable, but it can't be bioaccumulative. In other words, it's as a contaminant can't build up in an organism. And then you have the remainder 5% is can be inherently biodegradable. So already you see a whole bunch of definitions baked into what an EAL or environmentally accepted lubricant is. Sustainable lubricant is a different definition. Sustainable lubricant is basically measuring the entire environmental impact of a product by doing a life cycle analysis. And then when you do a cradle to grave life cycle analysis and look at many different metrics along the way, you have the ability to determine if one product is more sustainable than another. Regardless of the definition, there is definitely a trend to use base stocks, additive components that are more sustainable. And one of the key strategies for that is using plant-based lubricants. Plant-based lubricants historically have had challenges in thermally robust or applications where there's a lot of water because they're susceptible to hydrolysis and fairly rapid decomposition. There's been a lot of improvements in plant-based lubricants, and we're seeing some real promise for having a plant-based base oil, for example, as a basis for a more sustainable lubricant. The other strategy that we're also seeing employed is carbon offset. So when you buy a gallon of oil, there's a certain amount of that goes to offsetting the carbon produced from that gallon of oil. When you have a reduction in carbon emissions from one party that is certified and verifiable, that is sold to another party, and that can be used to compensate for the emissions that are made. So in this case, let's say if you are capturing methane gas over a landfill, then the amount of greenhouse gases that are prevented now through that practice can then be sold to, say, an oil company that can be compensated for the emissions made in generating, say, a gallon of oil. So let's talk about sustainable lubrication practices. Now, this encompasses a wide range of different things, but consider oil analysis. If you use oil analysis to transition from time-based oil change intervals to condition-based, oil analysis is absolutely an environmentally sustainable practice. What about varnish, minimizing and eliminating, making sure you don't have to deal with varnish, which increases bearing temperatures, which increases coefficient of friction and wear rates, all of which lead to non-sustainable things. So minimizing varnish is a sustainable practice. Oil flushing. Oil flushing is this kind of thing that is this when your system needs to be flushed, there is nothing else that displaces oil flushing. It's super valuable, very important. However, it is not very sustainable. A lot of energy is required, a lot of oil is wasted, and should only be done when absolutely necessary. So minimizing the conditions that would require an oil flush is sustainable. Avoiding contamination, that's a key one. Making sure your oil stays clean and dry is also a key one. And finally, extending the life of the oil by additive replenishment, another sustainable practice that can absolutely improve this sustainability, lower the carbon footprint of your practice. Now, another area that we're seeing a lot of focus on is on energy efficiency. And sometimes this means the transition, say, to more specialized base stocks such as synthetics. Not always, but sometimes that is. And also maybe the use of tribofilms or nanoparticles that can help lower coefficient of friction, and in many cases also help improve wear characteristics. So a lot of focus on and trying to make lubricants more efficient, because they can then directly make the equipment and machine more effective. Now, one thing just to keep in mind on energy efficiency, it really depends on the application. So we've seen a pretty significant change in oils used in your car as we've gone from, say, 15W40 down to 5W30 down to 0W16. So we've seen pretty significant changes in engine oil formulations. Other applications such as worm gears, hydraulics are very energy intensive, but there are also applications where you can pretty easily measure the energy efficiency improvement by moving from one technology to another. And I think that we will continue to see a lot of advancements in the use of more energy efficient materials as well. One of the big contributors to the total carbon or greenhouse gas contributions of an oil is the end of life and how the product is dealt with at the end of its life. So certainly one way of trying to minimize this impact is by increasing drain intervals. The other thing that can be done is by looking at and going to great efforts to try to get your oil to be re-refined at the end of its life instead of incineration. That has a pretty significant impact on reducing the carbon life, and then actually puts us back into a circular economy. So that those are definitely efforts that we are seeing that are driving us towards more sustainable both lubricants and lubrication practices. So if we look at the technology readiness level or the maturity of these different technologies and see over the next 10 to 15 years, as we're becoming more sustainable in our lubrication practices, what we'll see is we already actually have some very, very good technologies in place today for increasing drain intervals and re-refining the oil at the end of its life. I think what we're going to see is the deployment of more and more sustainable lubrication practices and more of a focus on making sure that all of the practices we're doing are in fact sustainable. And I think that we will continue to see maybe lagging behind that is the development of more advanced lubricants that will have an overall lower greenhouse gas contribution and a lower environmental impact. So over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, I think sustainable lubricants is the technology that has the most catching up to do. But we're certainly going to see a lot of advancements that will help all of us meet the drive towards net zero.
So let's talk for a moment about life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis. This is essentially a systematic approach at measuring the potential environmental impact of a product or service. And when you go through creating an inventory of all of the potential impacts of every single aspect of manufacturing the product, from extraction to all of the emissions and water that's created, you end up with a wide range of different what are referred to as midpoint indicators. These midpoint indicators then can be lumped together to suggest various different damage pathways, and ultimately you'll end up with endpoint indicators, which are typically classified as what kind of damage, the overall damage to human health health, the overall damage to the ecosystem, and the overall damage to resource availability. One of the things that we look at most common is just one part of the midpoint indicator, the total global warming potential, or the carbon dioxide equivalent, CO2e. So that's often the most used measurement and something that's used most often in our industry. Keep in mind there's many other aspects of an LCA as well to fully assess the environmental and compare the environmental impact of different products. So in the case of lubricating oils, we would look at the cradle to gate analysis, would look at things like crude oil exploration, extraction, transportation, and processing to the refinery, and then actually refining the lubricant and packaging it and blending it so that we actually have a finished base oil. We would do the exact same process for the different additive components, and ultimately end up with a life cycle assessment of the lubricant from cradle to gate until a product actually gets shipped off. Once a product gets shipped off, it's used, then the next part is cradle to grave, what happens at the end of its life, and that's another key measurement for us to look at here as well. So let's look at a real life example. If you're evaluating the environmental impact of one product versus another, LCA is a super powerful tool. So let's say you're looking at a mineral oil versus a PAO-based synthetic oil. You do a life cycle assessment, and from a cradle to gate perspective, it actually requires twice as much carbon to make a PAO-based fluid than it does a mineral-based oil. However, when you look at the full aspect of the cradle to grave aspect, and you look at the end of life scenario, then you can see the majority of the contribution to the total amount of carbon used in these two different products is at the end of the life of the product. So even though it costs twice as much or requires twice as much carbon to make a PAO-based lubricant, if you're able to use it for twice as long and prevent the disposal or incineration of this product, then actually it has a lower impact from an environmental perspective. So again, this is not looking at the quality of the products or energy efficiency, but if you're just looking at the environmental sustainability between the two products, LCA can be a really powerful tool to help you make some of these decisions. So let me share an example with you on how we use life cycle assessment to fully evaluate the environmental impact that our technologies have with our customers. So in this case, let's say that we are looking at a mineral-based turbine oil that is based in, say, North America. And location impacts, it does impact transportation a little bit, but transportation is actually a pretty small aspect of this. Most critically, location will impact the percentage of oils that's either re-refined or incinerated at the end of the life of the product. And so let's say in this case we have one large frame gas turbine that has 25,000 liters of oil. The oil is lasting for 8 years, and instead of disposing of the oil, flushing, and putting in brand new oil at the end of its life, we're able to extend the life by adding 3% of a product called decom-AO, which replenishes the antioxidant in the product. And you can see annualized that we have a reduction of about 76% compared to the current situation. So this is taking into account all of the carbon that's produced in the generation, manufacturing, and transportation of our products, subtracted from what the current practice is. So it does allow to a pretty simple way of evaluating the environmental impact of applying one technology versus the other. So at Fluitec, we refer to this practice of removing the bad stuff out of the oil as it ages, replenishing it with the sacrificial components that are depleting throughout its life as a fill for life strategy. Essentially, we're trying to do whatever technically is feasible to allow that oil to last for as long as possible without impairing any of its actual performance characteristics. So this can be one strategy that can be used to decrease the carbon footprint of industrial lubricants. And this brings us to our conclusion. So first, we talked about how the industry is going through decarbonization, and as we drive towards net zero, we will see both significant and rapid changes in the industry. All of this is driving towards sustainability improvements, And in this journey, however, you should be aware of greenwashing. And the most powerful thing you can do to fully assess different products is to look at life cycle assessment and whether or not full life cycle assessment has been done. This really is a good tool to help you understand or compare different products and avoid the negative marketing tactic referred to as greenwashing. The three most significant movements we're seeing here in the lubricant industry, the greening of the lubricant industry, is first of all actually using greener lubricants and more sustainable lubricants, often from plant-based fluids. We're looking at incorporating more sustainable lubrication practices. And finally, we're also looking at improving the end-of-life scenario, looking at re-refining or also extending drain intervals for as long as possible. The strategy that we are pursuing at Fluitec is Fill for Life oils. Now, in conclusion, the amount of carbon that is contributed from the manufacturing, use, and disposal of industrial lubricants is relatively a drop in the bucket. However, as laid out in the International Energy Agency's roadmap to net zero, the solution is not about one big silver bullet, but hundreds of activities that are harmoniously working together to decarbonize our industry. Using sustainably sourced, carbon-free lubricants, or energy-efficient lubricants, or transitioning all industrial lubricants to Fill for Life oils will not save the world. However, it can provide a meaningful reduction in our carbon footprint. We believe if this is done intelligently, not only is it possible to lower the lubricant-related carbon footprint of your operation, but you can also do this while increasing reliability of your equipment and decreasing operating costs. Thank you very much.
Greg, that was an awesome presentation. Thanks so much. We actually, looks like Sonia has a nice comment there, right? So kudos on the LCA chart. That was good. And yeah, greenwashing is a prominent. I think I asked that in the panel earlier about how do we deal with all the greenwashing out there and get our message through in terms of real sustainability. Quick question for you: do you see on the oil OEM side, do you see new technologies where they're formulating sustainability into the oils with life extension at the formulation level? Because I know we focus on Fluitec a lot of the in-service and saving bed oil. So what are you seeing in terms of new formulation technologies?
I think that's a great question, Josh. I think the majority of focus has been on making lubricants that are more energy efficient. That's a huge driver, and basically making lubricants that are going to perform better and last longer. So that has been the majority of the focus. And then the other focus is on where in EAL lubricants, where basically it's regulated that end users use certified biodegradable oils. We're seeing a lot of effort on that as well. But I think in the coming very near future, we're going to see a merging of the two, where not only are we looking at blending products that are more energy efficient, that can have longer life, that perform better, but are actually also made from more sustainable sources, maybe more plant-based sources. So it has been a little bit challenging because some of the plant-based oils, when you use them in industrial applications and then sprinkle a little bit of water in the system, then they'll fairly quickly decompose, and so but there have been a lot of advancements, and there's a lot of research in this area right now on how to make plant-based lubricants stable enough for a lot of other industrial applications.
And I guess the nice shout out to Paul. We're not claiming that we're going to save the world in this, this hyper, but thanks.
Yeah, I would just argue that there is nothing that there's just no single activity that's going to save the world. If we do want to decarbonize our industry and get to net zero, it has to be it's not just using wind energy. It's not one solution. It is literally hundreds or thousands of different things that are all kind of working together.
And early on, you alluded to the oil analysis being a tool, right? So transitioning from, say, time-based to on-condition-based. Do you see any technological advancements there to help the sustainable aspect of condition monitoring or managing oil as an asset?
It's actually the presentation just before mine from Ben Hartman of MRT. Actually, was a really nice example of how you can use oil analysis to better show what can be done to extend the life of industrial lubricants. That being said, I think the next iteration of this is the deployment of inline sensors. Sensors have been around for the last 20 years, but just I would say in the last few years, have we seen a really significant advancement in the technology and what can be monitored in line. The cost is continually being driven down. So ultimately, I think, I think industrial lubricant laboratories, I mean, a big chunk of the business is managing fleets. And as we see the electrification of vehicles, I think oil analysis lab business is going down. Now we're going to also see the deployment of sensors. So I think we're going to end up seeing labs really focused on high value, boutique, very specialized testing. There's still going to be a big place for laboratories that have that technical knowledge to be able to do that. But I think we are going to see the deployment of sensors much more in the last 10 years than we've ever seen before.
I think Rich just posted something. I'll let you read through that.
There's enough adoption of ISO 14001, and it doesn't get recognized throughout those corporations committing to it, and the impact decisions around lubricant optimization. Great question. You believe there's potential for this in those incorporating or looking at ISO 55000, or there are standards or regulations that can help push this into can't read that last sentence.
Push this
individual champions.
Individual champions.
Yes. Okay.
So buying at the top level, right?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, that's a complex, multi-layered question there, Rich, and I wouldn't expect anything else from you.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. So there is a big opportunity at ISO 55000 to incorporate more sustainable on how people can basically use the principles identified in ISO 55000 to have more sustainable lubrication practices. But the first question, no, I don't think there is enough adoption of ISO 14000, or is there any kind of recognition from the industry to make lubricant related decisions around that? So I think we still have a lot of room for improvement there. ISO 55000, ICML also has a document outlining all of the principles of ISO 55000 that are following this guideline. There is tremendous opportunity, I think, for this document to help lead us to a more sustainable future. Great question.
Excellent. I think we have time for just one more from Mika. Do you see a lot of interest towards these solutions now in various industries, or are we just at the beginning?
Yeah, we are just at the beginning. I think there's still so much room. In fact, just in our company, for example, the vast majority of our customers don't buy our solutions because it's good for the world. They buy our solutions to improve the reliability and operational, their operation of their machines. And so I think the only way that we can have, that we can kind of merge these two things is if we are also focused on not only improving machinery efficiency and machinery reliability, but we also tie that to carbon savings as well. And the two are really linked. But most customers right now are really just focused first on what can I do to increase the reliability of my machine? Second, what can I do to lower my costs?
And but I think we're going to see more and more of an effort as well to also be able to accomplish these two things while also having a greener lubrication program.
Excellent. Greg Livingstone, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, your insights. Thank you all for attending this session. Please connect with Greg in the LRVS app and on LinkedIn, and if you've got more follow-up questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh. Pleasure.